Hey, I'd like to talk to you about streaming in New Zealand schools. What it is, what the drawbacks are, what the benefits are, and what we can do as teachers to help benefit our students. So, in New Zealand schools, specifically in maths, students can often get placed into upper and lower classes based on their test scores primarily, and then the distribution of those. Now, it does sound helpful, but the drawbacks are that it can really affect the student's identity in that they can think of themselves as being lower, which can then impact their growth and their learning. Let's talk about streaming. Well, I want to start off with the benefits of streaming. And streaming helps students hit the target of challenge, provide a challenge that's appropriate to the students. If you don't challenge the students enough, they can finish that project really quickly and then be bored in between finishing that and not really knowing what to do next. And then they start chatting with their neighbor, and then that chatter starts to build up. If they're too challenged, you give them this worksheet with lots of problems, and they look at it and they feel overwhelmed and they just check out. And they lean back and then they start chatting with their friend. So having that appropriate challenge is a lot easier to do to hit that target when you're using a streamed class. It also saves a lot of energy and time because if the students are appropriately challenged, then going to one side of the classroom and explaining, I don't know, fractions or ratios, and then going to the other side of the classroom and explaining calculus. Everyone's kind of at a similar point. And it also gives a really clear path on preparing for that lesson. It makes lesson planning a lot more succinct, and there's a clear direction and guide that could be used. Can reduce classroom management issues. The challenge seems to be a right fit for the student and their need. And because of that, it can really help them all, they can excel together, and that just kind of builds that momentum up. Streaming can help students speak up because if they're on an equal level with their peers, they feel like they have the confidence that they can then speak up and help out with the classroom, and they feel like they're not under everybody else. So more participation happens throughout. Students also tend to do more group work in a streamed lesson because they know that their neighbor is on an equal footing with them. They know that their understanding is quite similar and they feel comfortable reaching out to them. Switching up groups in a streamed classroom is a lot more welcomed. I've been finding group collaboration doesn't feel like someone dragging the rest of the group together, but it feels like they have a sense of solidarity and their safety in the classroom. Streaming also helps measure progress. So as a teacher, if we have the homework, we can look at it and see which questions aren't being well answered, and then we can use that information to then know what to focus on as a group. There tends to be more patterns across the group. We can set class-wide goals that make sense for where the students are at, and then it's also quicker to give meaningful feedback to the students. Let's talk about the drawbacks of streaming. This article here, titled "It's Time to End Streaming," specifically states that streaming harms young people. It tends to impact identity, achievement, a sense of potential, social choices, and then social cohesion. This article really clarifies that it's time to end streaming in Aotearoa. One of the reasons is that streaming can impact student identity. Once a student's told they're in the lower class, they start believing it, and then it comes kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. I do believe that it is a growth mindset where you've got students who are willing to grow more, but teachers may even unconsciously have that streamed bias then impact each class. And then that would mean that, if the teacher's not putting in a lot of effort into the classroom, then the students also just don't put in a lot of energy, and there's not a lot of hope for moving forward. It negatively impact student motivation. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy like we talked about. Low effort, students stop pushing themselves. Also, students can compare themselves with the upper class and think of themselves as less than. This really impacts Maori Pasifika students. Research does show that even unconsciously, there is less expectation from Maori and Pasifika students, and that impacts how they're placed and how they're taught and how they're treated. So we want to push against those unconscious biases. One example of that is in the tests. So maybe word problems can often take on Pakeha worldviews. So like worldviews is somebody who's not Maori. Tests will have language that is Pakeha focused. For example, maybe a word problem that says something like about skiing on the holidays or buying a brand new car, just something that's not well thought out. So those tests can reflect Pākehā lifestyles and norms that might not on their own stream students, but they can shape how schools rank students, and then that's how they're placed because of those tests that weren't aimed for those Māori and Pasifika learners. Streaming does make it hard to move up. Now, this is a big one because even if we start implementing some of the things I'm going to get into soon, it still doesn't necessarily impact this. Streaming is like a pipeline where you've got the water flowing through the pipe, and it's really difficult for students to jump from one pipe to the other. It's an enclosed system. Streaming can cause perfectionism creep for the upper. So high stream kids can burn out trying to meet inflated expectations. Their unspoken rule is you're not allowed to fail. You're not allowed to struggle. You're not allowed to not know the answer immediately. It brings anxiety and imposter syndrome. These students can also miss out on the growth that comes from helping their peers and learning to explain ideas. So my face is in the way, but what can we do about it? We can integrate embodied teaching. Let me move my face. There's two things we can do. We can integrate embodied teaching, and we can integrate Māori and Pasifika values into the classroom. Embodied teaching uses movement, gestures, space to communicate and connect and deepen learning. There's this 7-chapter book about embodied teaching, and it talks about how your body teaches. You use movement, you can use silence, you can use gestures, hand gestures, to really emphasize and help the students learn. So here we are with visual cues, specifically helping language gaps and students with ADHD or dyslexia. It can really benefit them to have the visuals and showing your hands. Embodied teaching makes teachers more human and relatable, because you're not just a robot going through the lessons, but you're using your voice as an instrument. You're getting low and speaking quietly when it's really, really important, or you're speaking loud in order to get their attention. Where you sitting at students' levels invites them. You're more of their ally rather than like an authoritarian figure. You're still in charge, right? But you don't need to lord that over them. You still want them to be part of the troubleshooting process and to present their mistakes and their errors, and that way we can work around them. And I, as a teacher, am making mistakes and errors as well, and showing them that it's okay to do that. We're troubleshooting. We try a troubleshooting method. We make a mistake, and then we keep moving forward. We want to be careful about how we use our voice. We want to use more than just our voice. We want to use the board, projector. We want to use printed handouts and real-life props. But I've been finding that if I give a student a worksheet with lots of problems on it, or maybe one big problem with multiple steps, they'll kind of just slouch and just check out. So they'll be like, Mr. McIntosh, this is too hard. If I do a worksheet, I want it to be repetition. I want it to be problems that they've already done before, and that they're using that for review, and they can feel confident going through those questions. So worksheets can be a little overwhelming initially, but it is important to have a variety of different methods. Same thing with the textbook. You have that heavy thing, crack open to page 640, whatever, and they're like, ah. So when I draw problems up on the board, one by one, and they're answering those questions one by one, they seem to be more receptive to that. Embodied teaching makes space inclusive and more engaging. Sitting down with the students and walking around, not just being up at the front of the board, but also walking around the classroom, showing that you're giving them appropriate attention, equally distributed across each student. Making the physical space more inclusive and engaging, like walking around the room like we talked about, showing them that they're important. Also, just like sitting down and asking them how their winter break was. That can go a really long way. Look at them, make eye contact, smile, laugh. Māori values as well. This is really important because this is a key factor as to what is a Kiwi school. Māori values replace ranking with relationships, lifting all learners and breaking the bias of streaming. An example would be whanaungatanga, which is relationships come first. Streaming can break trust and connection, so in order to fight against that, we build those relationships. Manakitanga, so care and respect for all. Katahitanga, unity and inclusion, which is really important in getting all the students together and including them and making sure that each student feels like they're getting an equal amount of attention. Ako, so everyone teaches, giving the students opportunity to teach, to show me and to show the rest of the class what they've learned. Tura na waiwai, a place to stand, help give them belonging and identity and know their mana. Every learner has inherent worth, and we want to know their stories and their background. We build strong relationships with every single student, regardless of their stream, whether they're upper or they're lower. Māori values get to know whānau and the stories of each individual student. Māori values, a big part of it is affirming each of the students' mana through their praise. So giving praise to their effort that they're putting in. Not so much, hey, you got a really great score in this test, but instead affirming their resilience, that they pushed through and they tried really hard. They put in a lot of effort and their brain feels like it's going to melt, and that's good. That's a good thing. That means they tried it. They put the effort in. Allowing students to lead the learning. Write the problem up on the board, and you go and you look at their worksheet and you see they worked on it, and you check their answer and it's correct, and you say, hey, do you feel comfortable popping up in the front of the room and writing that out? And a lot of students are very receptive to that. Validate more than just the academic smarts, but I've got students that will bring in some of the artwork that they've completed in their art class, and they're really excited to show me. Like, one of my students completed this one of their niece, and it's an etching work, and it's phenomenal. It depicts the emotions, it utilizes the etching just to get that raw feeling there, and I just expressed how excited I was about that piece, and she then gave it to me. And it's important to acknowledge the efforts that they're putting in holistically in the entire classroom rather than just math. Life is more than just that. We recognize their culture, Pasifika and Maori culture. Some students thrive when learning isn't trapped in a worksheet, but they recognize that their cultural values, their norms, their lifestyles, those things are just as equally important as academic knowledge. The teacher is the protector of fairness. Now, we talk about relationships, we talk about getting down on the level of the students. Yet, even still, the teacher, me, I hold this position of authority, and it's important for me to let them know I'm still in charge, but I don't need to push them and say, you're below me. We're learning, we're co-equal learners. I need to learn how they learn. They are an expert in themselves. I know math pretty well. I know how to troubleshoot things pretty well, but I don't know each student. I'm not a master in each student, and I want to be. And learning from them as well, and we're learning together. It makes an environment where everybody feels fair, and they feel like they're getting an equal amount of attention, and they know that they're able to contribute as well. With conclusion, it's important to remember that streaming can cause real harm to their identity, especially Maori and Pasifika students. Streaming can also bring targeted support, which is really important for the students. For me, for preparing, I can prepare specifically for what my students need. It's more than just what we teach, but how we teach it, just as equally important to our students. Embodied teaching helps all learners engage in the classroom and in the content. Maori values like whanangatanga and manakitanga keep relationships at the center. So with the right mindset, with the growth mindset, every student can feel seen, they can feel valued, they can feel capable of growth. Streaming can stay, but the way we live inside it has to be inclusive, and we have to consider the impacts that it can have on students. So thanks for hearing me out on streaming and what we can do. Appreciate your time. Thank you.